Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments HQ, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change through mindset and wellness and their impact on relationships. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Siria Gutierrez, along with my co-host, Melissa Robena. On this episode, we discuss the Father's Day holiday and our current relationships with our fathers. We discuss how working on ourselves has led us to wanting to improve these relationships and the empathy we have for them.
I'm really excited to talk about the Father's Day dread.
Yes. For me, it's not just Father's Day, it's also Mother's Day, but it was more on brand for us to talk about.
Well, I feel like Pivotal Moments HQ should really be, like the tagline should be a podcast exploring and celebrating stories of daddy issues and its impact on mindset and wellness. You know, it's just, I mean, it's definitely on brand.
It is on brand for us to talk about this, but you know, the holidays, which we touched on before, they do bring up a bunch of different issues, but like Father's Day, I don't know, it brings up something else. And I'm like in a really confusing state with my dad right now.
I'm not sure where you are. I don't even know how you would, because you're not estranged, but you're also not close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's one of those things where it's just a confusing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's a confusing relationship, that's for sure. Good.
No, but Father's Day always created some anxiety within me, because there is this idea that we need to, I don't know, I would always get asked, well, are you going to see your dad on Father's Day? What are you going to get him? And it always gave me anxiety, because I remember spending hours, maybe not hours, it felt like hours, at the card section of the grocery store trying to find a card that encapsulated how I felt about my dad, but kind of what you kind of touched on, my relationship. I'm sure everyone's relationship with their fathers is different and unique, but it's like, how do you find a card that says, thanks for abandoning me, but I still love you and need your approval?
There's not many places that you can find that. And, you know, I'm glad you brought up the cards, because we've talked about doing cards, guys, and our lives have gotten so crazy in the last couple months. I can say mine in the last month for sure. I've been in a tailspin, but we did come up with some cards that would better encapsulate our feelings. Do you remember this, Melissa?
Oh, absolutely. We were laughing so hard when we came up with these sayings. And I really think that they're going to be a hit, because I learned that 1 in 4 people actually grew up in a household without their father. So I'm sure the dread that we've felt when it came to Father's Day it's not a single event, and other people are experiencing this too.
Correct. You are definitely not alone. Neither are we. Here are some of the highlights, dear listeners, of things that we came up with. This card is from my therapist. Thanks for her second house. All you're getting is a card because all of my money goes to my therapist. And let's see. Happy blank day. So happy Mother's Day. Happy Father's Day. Happy day.
Oh,
That's it. No fluff.
I also really like the one. It's I see my therapist more than I see you. Happy Father's Day.
Yes. Or what about this classic? You weren't the world's best dad, but I'm not on a stripper pole, so happy Father's Day. I thought that one was good. And then it branched out into some other cards.
So we've got a whole line coming.
Yeah. Thank you for not being my dad. Like that'd be one that you could, give to your significant other.
But don't worry, listeners, we'll have these coming to you soon. I think we're going to start making graphics and cards and stuff. So if you're in the same boat that we are, we've got you covered.
Yeah. So, it was funny because after we created a whole list of this, we were brainstorming this.
We couldn't stop.
We could not stop. We were having so much fun. We were laughing the whole time. So then I go back and I tell Matt everything, guys. Like if you tell me something, know that he's going to know. He's not going to tell anybody else because he's just like, whatever. But like he knows everything. And so I went back and I told him most everything. I think there's like a couple things that if I've been sworn to secrecy with like a blood vow kind of a thing, like those things.
Okay, I was worried there for a second. I was like,
no, there's like, okay, so So there's my asterisk, okay? It's like one or two things that he does not know, and that he doesn't know because he doesn't listen to the podcast. But anyway, so I went back and I was reading those off to him. He's like, those are really mean. I was like, no, they're funny. He's like, no, they're mean. I was like,
okay, but you grew up in a really nice,
yeah, like you're all
loving
functional
family. Like, get the fuck out of here.
The rest of us who appreciate sarcasm for the role it has played in our lives really, really appreciate this. And we think some of them will be funny. So we are going to do this one day. This year.
I say this year. But
this year. We're putting it out there in the universe. But yeah, but it was one of those things where it was really cathartic just to go through and kind of talk about those impacts. But even then, I think back when we made that list, that was back in January, I was in a very different place with my dad. So let's check in. Where are you right now with your daddy relationship?
Okay, so I think I may have mentioned that my father and I had talked about going on a camping trip this year because we used to go camping a lot growing up. We were supposed to go in September. We have yet to plan. And I don't know if that's really going to come to fruition, but not because we don't necessarily want to, but because the campgrounds are limited, especially the campground that we want to go to. But either way, I want to see him. But I was thinking about this the other day. I have not once gone and stayed the night at my father's house in over 20 years. And I was like, that is a really long time to have never stayed the night or vacation. Because anytime I would go to my hometown, my father lived there at that time. And so I would go to see my siblings or my mother, and I would maybe spend a day like with my dad having lunch, and then I would leave. And I was like, well, I did my daughter due diligence. Like, I'm good. But I'm looking forward to, now that he's in retirement, actually spending more time with him. But I'm glad that you asked, because I remember in therapy, anytime my counselor would mention my father, I'd be like, I'm nothing like him. And she was like, okay. Recently, though, she was talking about my father, and I smiled and I said, well, his current wife, I hate saying it like that, but there's been so many. So his current wife was like, you and your father are so similar. And it actually brought a smile to my face. And so my counselor was like, well, talk to me about that. Like, what does that mean to you? And I said, my father may not be perfect, and there's aspects of him that I don't care for or approve that he did, but there are some really great qualities that he has that I do see reflected in myself. And so that does make me smile, because I find that to be a compliment. Huge paradigm shift, 180-degree, outlook on something. If you had asked me 2 years earlier, would have been like, I'm nothing like him.
So what are some of those things that you're noticing that you can appreciate?
I would say, well, I don't know if it's healthy, but this inability to stay still. My father's exactly the same way. He is in retirement, and he's probably busier now than he was when he was working. And if you know me, which I know you do,
and listeners, so do you. So do you.
I can't stay still. It's really hard for me too. So there's that. But he's also just very detail oriented, very clean. I'm a little OCD that way. So I definitely get stuff like that from him. But we have the same love for the same movies, same books and stuff like that. So my appreciation for the outdoors is 100% because of him. So those are the things that I can reflect on now and say, I definitely got that from him. What about you? Where are you at with your father?
Where you is. So here's where I'm at. When we were writing that list, I was in probably the same place I've been in for, I don't know, probably the majority of my life. But then at the end of April, things shifted. And the shift happened in partly due to the fact that his mom died. So my grandmother passed away. And I reached out to him because I'd learned through like a roundabout fucked up way that it was like almost pure luck that I found out that my grandmother was in hospice. Okay. Because I called my mom to ask her to do a favor for me. And she was like, oh, hey, by the way, your dad's in New Orleans because your grandmother's in hospice. I was like, was anybody going to tell me this? But anyways, so I felt like, okay, well, part of my due diligence as being a good daughter is reaching out, right? So I reached out while he was in New Orleans, and we talked for a little bit. And that conversation started ringing this bell of this core belief inside me that I ruined my parents' life. And I had like a major, I would call it a panic attack, but really it was a fight with one of my core beliefs. And I was very fortunate that Matt was on a walk during this. So it's like I was having the conversation with my dad, and we talked for, I don't know, probably like an hour. And he was just telling me things about how he'd spent time with his mom. And there was just this gentleness in there that I couldn't reconcile with the image that I have of him. And so the compassion part of me, I'm very compassionate, I'm very empathetic, was really struggling. And so, after we had that conversation, I just like, that is the core belief, this like deep wound inside that I ruined my parents' life by being born. That's what came up. So I started struggling with that. Right. And just kind of having a couple other conversations. The whole death of my grandmother has been, I don't want to call it an issue, but it has definitely caused a ripple in the family, because then my dad doesn't like how my mom reacted or didn't react, and, didn't have that support. And so I was talking to my therapist about it, and she was like, the love and hate of your parents is so intertwined. They don't know where it starts and where it ends. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because they've been together my entire life. They've never really split up. Every now and then there would be periods of time where they would be gone and things like that. So then, that's the end of April. During May, dear listeners, I'm going to talk more about this on a future episode, but spoiler alert, my relationship with the firm that shall not be named ended. Okay. It ended kind of abruptly, and some people would call it being fired. I'm calling it terminating my contract, because that's exactly literally what it was. And on my own business. So that happened, and my dad has a case with the firm. So I was like, well, I don't want my dad to get the letter from the firm saying, here are your options of who you get to pick from, and be like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't even know. So I reached out to him to tell him, like, hey, here's kind of what's going on. You're going to get a letter from the law firm explaining your options. And I didn't want you to be surprised. And I figured, I can't solicit my clients. I can't do any of that. Like, there's stuff in my contract, and that's fine. But it's like, this is my dad. Like, at the very least, I'm going to call out and reach out to him, because I think the day before I was struggling with the fact that, that I don't feel like I have parents who I can lean on during this kind of crazy time. So it's like, I have you, I have Matt. And so there was all of that. So I was kind of struggling with that, and I was like, okay, well, I can tell my dad this, like, it'll be fine, and I'll just let him know. So I called him up, and I kid you not, we had a conversation for an hour. I can't remember the last time we had a conversation that long. And Matt was like, that was really long. I was like, yeah. It's like, and we were laughing, and I was kind of crying. Like, I got a little emotional. But I didn't, at least I hope I didn't have it come through on the phone. But we just had like a really long conversation. And I think for the first time in my entire life, he gave me a pep talk, like a full on like dad pep talk. Like, I was totally blown away. I was like, really? He's like, you're going to be just fine. Like, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to you. And, people are just always jealous, and you got to watch out for them, but like, you're going to be fine. Like, and what did he gave me this compliment. He's like, you're young, you have no kids, you have no debts. You are in such an enviable position, Siria. Anybody would want to be in your position right now. He's like, you're going to be just fine. And I was like, did I just get compliments from my dad? Like, I mean, and the rest of the conversation was up and down. Like, he complained about my mom for a bit. And then we talked about,
you got to keep some things the same,
so it wasn't too far off, but it was just one of these things where we were going, back and forth, and, I started asking him more questions about himself. Like, why he had come here to the United States. Like, I knew bits and pieces, but I didn't know the whole story. And the week prior, to things imploding, we'd been in Denver, and I saw my cousin, because I had questions about my grandmother, and they'd spent a bunch of time together. And so then he was like, my cousin Michelle was like, oh yeah, well, your dad used to live with my parents. I was like, really? Like, I had no idea of his very early years. And so in this conversation, we're going back and forth, we're telling all these things. And so I finally got some Melissa courage. That's what I'm going to call it. And I asked a powerful question, and I asked him, I was like, why did you come to the US? And he was like, well, had these opportunities, had all these other things. I was like, okay, well, in the middle of this conversation, he's complaining about my mom and, how she wasn't supportive for him. He feels like not the kind of support he would have wanted when his mom passes away. And at this point, both of his parents are dead. And so then I asked him, I was like, why did you bring mom to the US? He was like, well, to be honest, I only brought her because of you. And when you were born, your mom got an infection. He's like, you know that. It's like, yeah, my mom's got this huge cesarean scar that goes like from her upper abdomen all the way down. And it's like in a T shape. She got this huge infection at the public hospital. And, she likes to remind me it was a public hospital because, the rest of her kids were all born in a private hospital and, there's all kinds of things there. But I want to make sure I'm breathing here because. So then we're going through the conversation. And he's like, so when your mom had that infection, I took care of you. I took care of you for like 2 or 3 weeks. And had we not bonded during that time period, I bonded to you at that point. But if we hadn't, I wouldn't have brought you guys here to the US. Yeah, that's the reaction I had. I'm like,
damn.
Yeah. So it was
wow.
Like, yeah. So it was like, okay. He's like, so, I was getting news back from, that things that your mom was doing, this and that. And I didn't want you to grow up in that environment. So I don't know what he heard, if it was true or not, but from his point of view, it's his truth. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, but just that information of, had we not bonded, it probably would have just been like, all right, whatever. I got some random kid in Central America, and he would have made his life here in the US without us. And so that's why, like, I go back to this core belief of just like, I ruined their lives. And so I'm still working on this, guys, and I'm going to continue to work on this one because it is one I've been dealing with my whole life. But that information, just him being so frank about it.
Well, I was talking to my counselor several years ago about this estrangement that I have with my father, and that how every time he and I would speak on the phone, that I felt that it was very surfacey, and I didn't like that. But I also wasn't willing to share any bit of myself. And so for a while there, my husband and I, we were separated, and we weren't sure if we were going to continue to stay together. And I actually took a leap of faith and was sharing pieces of that story with my dad. And I found that he started to share stuff with me, stuff mm-hmm. that his feelings, stuff that maybe was bothering him. And so it was me that needed to kind of, and maybe this is that Hispanic pride, I don't know, I'm just making an assumption here, that I needed to be the one to kind of reach out first because he couldn't. Mm-hmm. It might not even be pride. It could just be he didn't know how. So let me help you. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And so since then, though, he and I have strengthened our relationship. That's how we've been able to have some of the more serious conversations that I've shared with you about, which is, me telling him, frankly, I didn't feel safe or welcome in your house growing up. Mm-hmm. I would never have had the courage to do that had we not slowly bridged that gap. But even...
Well, and that's why I'm calling it the Melissa Courage, because, I know that you've worked on this, and I know that you've put yourself out there first with your dad, and that has helped him. And that, I mean, look, you guys, I think you're going to do the camping trip. I'm holding out hope for the camping trip, but just knowing it's like, okay, so that's what I did. It's like, I work with allies, and it was like, for whatever reason, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the Melissa thing right now. And I'm going to ask something more difficult. And what I got out of it was, I got this, I got a pep talk. I got a long conversation. I got history of the family that I didn't know. We were laughing and bonding over things. And then at the end of the conversation, here's the crazy part. I got compassion because he's like, do you want me to tell your mom about what has happened with the firm? And I was like, you know what? She's going to be mad that I told you first anyways. So I'm not going to win no matter what. He's like, you know what? I'll let you tell her in your own time. And when I told my therapist that, she was like, that was compassion. Like, he was giving you like a break. And I was like, okay, but I feel like I got that because I took a book, or I took a page from your chapters from your book. I'm just fucking up the whole saying right now. And did that. So it's like, knowing that you're able to do that and seeing what it's done, I don't know that I'll be ever ready to, take a long camping trip with my dad, but at least having a bit more of that conversation, I have gratitude for you doing it, because that showed me that I could possibly do it as well.
I think when we talk about empathy and compassion, I want to say that has definitely helped me in my shift with my relationship with my father, but also the way that I look at Father's Day. Because Father's Day, I seriously dreaded it every time it came up, especially when my father and I were estranged, because I so desperately wanted that relationship with him. And at that time, he still had interaction with my 3 other siblings. So, he would come and pick them up, and I was left at my mom's house by myself. And it was devastating, absolutely devastating. But now as I'm getting older, my siblings, they have kids, and I'm the only one that still has communication with my father. So now I just have a lot of empathy and sympathy for my father, because I know he asks about my siblings every time we talk, but none of them connect with him. So when Father's Day rolls around, as much as I had dreaded it, I wonder what it's like for him. And, if it's, he's probably grieving the loss of, the relationships that he had with his kids. I mean, granted, he played a big role in most of those, but I never once thought about what it had been like for him on Father's Day until this year.
And what has come up for you?
It makes me sad. It makes me really sad. But, I also know that I can't take that on as my own, but I can at least provide compassion for him at that time. So I will go out of my way to, I usually will just call him and text him, but, just letting him know that someone out there does care, does love and appreciate him, and does think that,
does think of them.
Does think of them. Exactly.
I think that really at the end of the day, that's what those holidays are for, is to show those people that you're thinking about them. And so does it have to come with all of the pomp and circumstance of, the flowers, the outings, all that stuff? Yes and no. I think each family their own. I know for us, Mother's Day was always a bit bigger than Father's Day. And I think that's true in a lot of different places. Where people just spend more time. The busiest day at a restaurant is Mother's Day, because that's the one day that, mom doesn't have to cook. So everybody goes out, but like Father's Day would be just like another normal Sunday kind of a thing. So it's like, oh, okay. And it gets overlapped with graduations, so they don't necessarily get the same amount of recognition. I feel like even the aisle is split. It's like half graduation, half Father's Day. It's not quite the same, but I think it's just a different relationship. And so at this point, I don't know that I dread it as much going down that aisle. Like, I still don't like going down that aisle, because I feel like every single card for both Mother's Day and Father's Day is like, you're the greatest person in the entire planet, and I can't believe.
You showed me what it means to be loved. I'm like, get the hell out of here.
You showed me how to be a woman. You showed me, like, what I like in a man, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like...
Do the old Melissa classic on that one.
Exactly. And you'll have to watch the YouTube video for that, because it's a good one. But yeah, it's just one of those things where... like, I can see it, but this year was a little different, because I got to tell you, even for Mother's Day, I didn't do anything. This was the first year in a very long time that I did not go see my mom or buy her something. I didn't buy anything this year, which is very rare for me to do. And part of it was we were flying back from Denver that day. So I called her from the Denver airport.
As you're catching your connecting flight?
Yeah. I was like, oh, gotta go. Bye. Oh, yeah, no, that's the airplane. Oh, I can't hear you over my mask. But we talked for a little bit, and so it was nice. But like this year, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we will go over, or we'll do something. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm in a different place with my dad, where I'm almost open to saying, like, hey, why don't we go have lunch? Like, I had lunch with my mom the other day and sent him, usually like I'll buy an extra meal and she can take it home for him. But like, maybe we could actually have lunch together and not have it just be my mom and I. I don't know. That feels like a big step, guys.
I believe in you.
I don't know if anybody has any tips on, how to do that. Of course, it would be a public place because we're trying not to have a meltdown. Actually, we did talk about it. There's a burger place right down the firm that shall not be named. That's like the best burgers in town. The Burger Bar on Flamingo. If you guys ever get a chance, you guys got to go check it out. It's just a little, like 1 or 2 miles away from the Strip, and delicious burgers. So we talked about it. He's like, oh yeah, no, that place is really good, but we never made it happen.
So I would just send him an invite. If you want to, even shoot him a text message if you can't find the courage to call him up on the phone.
I probably will. And do that because it's like any relationship. It's what you want to make out of it, what you want to do. And I feel like, I asked you what you appreciate. It's like I appreciate a lot of different things. In fact, I am currently drinking a Kern's guava nectar drink, and Kern's reminds me of my dad because like this is what he would always buy, and it's like, oh yeah, no, if I'm having a Kern's mango drink or guayaba, it's because of my dad. It's like, oh okay, the arts, that appreciation, even to a certain extent my fanaticism for things comes from him because like he's obsessed with music. So we took it in different angles and directions. So I can appreciate things there, but it's the relationship that I want to have. It's like, okay, well, I want it to be a little bit different than what it is now. I don't know what that looks like entirely, but I don't want it to be as much of the resentment that I've had before because that just no longer serves me.
It doesn't serve you anymore, but I like what you talk about, how we have the opportunity to create the relationship we want with our parents, whether it's your mother or your father. And I think the same goes for the holiday. I think that we can make the holiday whatever it is. If we choose not to, go all out and get the sappy card and, take mom or dad out for lunch, I think that that's okay. I think even a simple text message, do what is comfortable for you, that it doesn't feel fake. Extend that authentic line of communication, because I think that that's most important. Once you start to do that, even just little baby steps, they start to build those bridges that may have been destroyed from past traumas and experiences. But it does take time, and it is possible. Not to say my dad and I will ever be close like we were when I was younger, but I do like the direction where we're going. And I do believe that there's going to be a lot more connection in the future. There's still going to be difficult conversations that need to be had, I'm sure. But it's so nice to be able to pick up the phone and call my dad without that fear of, if I say something wrong, he's going to leave. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't have that anymore.
And I think that's a really good point, because I can say when I see my phone ringing and it's my dad, that same fear isn't there anymore. It's evolving. And this is definitely, when we get around to Father's Day next year, we'll see where these relationships are. But it is an evolution, and that's because we're doing the work on ourselves. If we were not doing this work, if we were not doing this podcast and talking about these issues, I don't know that I would be here, because I know I wouldn't have had that example of you taking that step. And I, because I've had the conversation with my therapist many times. She's like, well, why don't you just ask? And I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm just not doing it. But that is what happens. Your relationships start changing, and they start changing not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way that you want those relationships to be. And some relationships may fall apart, and that's okay. But if other relationships that you want to nurture and move forward, they can do that if that's what you want. It's all about choice. What do you want in the relationship?
We want to hear from you. How do you feel about the parental holidays? Let us know on our Instagram or our private Facebook group, Pivotal Moments HQ. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening. Remember, it's never too late, and you're right on time.